Press. Let us begin today's discussion, which is the differences between New Year, secular New Year, and the Jewish New Year, which we celebrate, which we call Rosh Hashanah. So, come on in, boys. Now, there are obviously, so right next to me. Now, there are obviously some obvious distinctions, but let's, excuse me. Let's not focus on the worst of the secular holiday. Let's focus on right there. No, you don't need anything. You can just sit.
What did you do this year?
Right.
I'm excited.
Let's focus on just the best. Let's now look at the secular holiday at its worst, like a bunch of drunk people puking over each other and outside Times Square. In the same way, we wouldn't judge the Jewish New Year by the people who are talking during the rabbi's sermon and coming late and just texting during the prayers. That's not fair to build a straw man like that. Let's try to look at it from the best perspective. What are some things that we think are attractive about the secular New Year that perhaps we could learn from them? And then what are some of the things that the Jewish New Year has, which the secular year takes maybe the complete opposite approach to it? So let's start by saying, let's challenge everybody. What are some things that we can learn from the secular New Year? Yes, Jeffrey Burt.
Jewish New Year's resolution. That's a good thing.
Okay, so the New Year's resolution, which Jeffrey wants to suggest, is a good thing. Is it a good thing? But is it a good thing? Is it a good thing? Is it a good thing?
Apparently not.
What is we learned? Now I could talk like this to Jeffrey Burt because he's somebody who's a teacher of mine who I consider a hero, so he knows I'm just teasing him.
I'm a strong man.
Right. Are the New Year's resolutions good? When I was in 9th grade, my Rebbe said, the only thing I like about the New Year's are the New Year's resolutions. But what does our Talmud say about vows? What does our Talmud say about vows? He says, one who makes a vow is like somebody who builds a false altar. And one who brings and one who fulfills the vow is even worse. It's like one who brings a sacrifice on that altar. In fact, would you not even agree, Mr. Jeffrey? Come sit down. Would you not even agree that the verse says, better not to vow than to vow and not to pay? Do we really think it's such a good thing to encourage everybody to take on New Year's resolutions, which in fact, most people are set up for failure from the beginning? And you raise a very interesting point, Jeffrey, a very interesting point, because what is the last ritual we do before we start our very own Rosh Hashanah? What is the last ritual we do? What's the last ritual we do? And what is the most important ritual expression on our high holidays? The revoking of the vows. Everything we're doing is the opposite of taking on resolutions. We're getting rid of the vows. We have the ceremony called the Hatarat Nidarim. We want to get rid of our vows. What we're supposed to do on the eve of Rosh Hashanah is go before a court, a bet din, and say, release me from my vows, from that I made in the past and that I'm going to make in the future. We say, Kol Nidrei, all the vows I've said, done with. We are anti the resolutions. We are anti these vows because these vows are going to set us up for failing. They're failing. So I don't object to your approach to saying we need to have ways of trying to improve ourselves spiritually, that's the point of a resolution. You're 100% correct. But the idea of putting it into a resolution or a vow is something that we're very suspicious of because we think it's setting us up. We think it's irresponsible. We think it's not realistic. We think it's setting us up for failure. And so it's interesting that the one thing that most people think is a good thing about the New Year's, which is the New Year's resolution, is we take the entirely opposite approach as a community. Okay, so yasher koach to you, Jeffrey, for really helping us along. Yes,
Can I first?
I vow never to.
Shoshana, yes.
Arthur calls on the fire.
You mean
Well, resolutions can come from introspection, and introspection is something that we do and something that other people do. And if your resolution is to do better than you've done in the past, it means that you've had to look at what you've done in the past and say that wasn't good enough, it wasn't acceptable. I have to do better. It's different than you say I lose 25 pounds or whatever. But there's a point of resolutions that says introspection is important.
so? Introspection is excellent. That's everything we're about. But do you ever hear a New Year's introspection? You always hear like a New Year's.
Where does your resolution?
Okay, so if it's coming from introspection, it depends on how it's framed. Obviously, I'm speaking in absolute terms, but it can be framed and done in a beautiful manner. But just as a baseline, the concept is not often framed like that, and that concept is not the approach of the Jewish approach, which is saying we want the introspection, but we don't want to do it in the form of a vow. So, but of course you're right, Shoshana. I'm just trying to build a straw man here. You're right. Yes, Eli.
And like gasoline.
Yeah.
Are there certain phrases you have to say for the vow to be legally binding according to Judaism? Like you have to say the words like I vow. Like this one.
So that's a whole. You're going into a very legalistic approach, and we're not going to have time to go down that road. But it's a question whether or not the vow is technically speaking binding if you don't say it in a certain way. But let's assume that it can be binding even without saying. You're supposed to say "bli neder" without taking a vow. When you say I'm going to do something, you say this year I'm going to come and study Torah in the yeshiva every day. You're supposed to say "bli neder" even about a mitzvah like that. Yeah. Mordechai.
Declarative statement like I am going to do something, is that considered a vow? from
It's-
the Jewish?
It's not biblically speaking a vow, but it's supposed to be in order to make sure you're not saying it improperly. You're supposed to say without taking a vow. Bli neder. Yeah, we have a question on the Zoom from Bruce or April. Yes, please speak loudly because we have a big crowd here and everybody wants to hear your question.
Okay, you're gonna tell me I'm wrong, so that's normal, but
Uh-oh. You see what my reputation is? You're right. You're right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you're wrong.
secular New Year seems to be forward-facing in terms of resolutions. We're talking about what to come, but Rosh Hashanah, renouncing the vows, and everything seems to be backward-facing. We're talking, we want to get rid of our sins from the past. So one looks ahead to the future, and one seems to be dwelling and in the past, and in our mistakes.
I know. I think it's a very interesting point. So let's just talk for a moment. Not even necessarily about your vows. I find that one of the themes of Rosh Hashanah is clearly one of the three main themes of Rosh Hashanah: Malchiot, Zichronot, and Shofarot. So let's just talk about Zichronot. Is really saying, look what we've done in the past. Look, we're trying to recall. We're taking the Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, as a way of reminding ourselves of special moments we've had in the past. It's very, often on Rosh Hashanah, many people, especially the older you get, you're not going to necessarily feel this when you're, in your teens, but the older you get, you sit in davening on Rosh Hashanah and your tears in your eyes because you're reminded of the past, of the life in the past. You're reminded of sitting in davening with your parents, your grandparents, or special moments. So Zichronot is remembrances. So our Rosh Hashanah is very much about remembering great moments in our life, like looking backwards. And I do think there's definitely a thing about the future, but it's not in the liturgy like that as much as the whole concept of a New Year's resolution. And I it's hard to judge because we're really it would be like judging Judaism on the basis of press releases, but I don't see as much of a focus on this is the time to take stock of where you are in life, which is what Zichronot really is about, and remembering, to rekindle the powerful relationship we have with God. But let's just, I don't want to go away from the initial question I had, which is what is something else we can learn from the secular New Year? What is something else we can learn from the secular New Year? Yes, Aviva.
I don't know, maybe the secular New Year starting fresh. Maybe sometimes people reach out to mend ways, or I know you do that, of course.
Do people do that at the New Year? Do you think it's time where people reach out to connect with others?
Maybe I remember
Hey, that would be a beautiful thing. Nobody's ever done it to me, but
lost touch with so and so. Maybe it's a good year to try to reconnect or something. I mean,
okay, so that would be a good thing if there is something. But I think what you're getting at is to something even deeper, which is something that is very powerful. Is that the New Year is one of the days to January 1st specifically is one of the days where there's just this tremendous unity in the world, that there is a common calendar for so much of the world.
Although not Jews.
Jews also observe this calendar and have to, by force of living in the world, recognize the secular calendar. We're living our lives around it, even though we have our own calendar. In addition, we can't ignore this calendar, and it creates a community of unity, even though it's not as unified as we like. It's a start that if you don't have a common calendar, you have nothing, you have much less even to talk about. So there is this powerful moment of unity where everybody is starting the year fresh with a common sense of unity. There is that idea for sure. Yeah, Jim.
Joy to the world. It's a joyful day.
It is a joyful day.
We just don't say joy to the world and we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
No, we do have this concept in the Jewish practice also, that since it's a coronation, we have shofarot, and one of the themes of the shofar is this concept of blasting the shofar for joy and celebration. So there is that theme within the Jewish New Year as well, this idea of a celebratory moment, of a recognition. Like, what are we celebrating on New Year's Eve? What are we really celebrating tonight? Everybody's going crazy. Everybody's happy, rejoicing. Why are they happy?
Looking forward to the future and optimistic.
And then maybe they're looking forward and optimistic,
Joy to the
or maybe they're just celebrating we made it through another year. Yeah, I mean, it's but you're right, there is this celebration. And why are we celebrating? That's a good question. You're like, why are you so happy? Why are you so happy? You go to somebody in New Year, why are you so happy? Maybe things could be optimistic, or maybe because we made it. Yeah, Simon Goldberg, please.
I think a little bit like when
Speak up.
when you
Simon.
ask someone like why are they happy on New Year's Eve, it's a little bit kind of just following the crowd. I don't think a lot of people deeply think about why they're celebrating New Year's Eve. Versus for Rosh Hashanah, we have our reasons, we learn our reasons. So for New Year's Eve, I think people are just like, okay, this is our holiday, like this is how we celebrate it, but they don't really have that deep reason behind it.
Yeah, they like want to be happy just to be happy.
That's just what the crowd is doing. That's what everybody does.
That's, I guess, fair, but on the other hand, it's really not so fair, because we don't want to just, like if we look at most Jewish holidays, most people gather for Passover Seder. They don't have the deep knowledge that you have, having studied Passover in school or thought about it, come to a yeshiva. So, but there are people who like analyze, like the so-called religious secularists. They'll analyze what's so special about this moment and why are people so happy. And if we analyze it, like the core message there, just like the past 6 Seders, we're celebrating freedom. Core message there is maybe they're optimistic for the coming year. It's a year of hope, of health, or it could be a year of maybe we survived the year, or maybe it's just an opportunity to have a day off to gather with your friends and you don't have to go to work tomorrow. Or, I'll remember when I was a little boy and And they said, I think it was Ronald Reagan, they said, what's Ronald Reagan doing on New Year's? And he said, he's watching football. And that was, he was trying to be like every man with that statement, saying he's part of the group and there's a sense of unity that everybody has this day. Like we can't, unlike Christmas, where Jews are explicitly excluded, New Year's has become a completely secular holiday.
It has become, although its origins.
Right, it's
The circumcision of Jesus.
right.
Mm.
But it's too late to grab a bagel at that bris.
What?
It's too late to grab a bagel at that bris. So it's really just today it's a secular holiday.
Today, are they celebrating?
They celebrate. I don't know what they're doing this year because it's a war. But when last time I was in Israel around this time, they had New Year's party celebrations for sure. I mean, they're not celebrating Christmas, but they're celebrating New Year's, and there were a New Year's party celebration.
But they
So
call it Sylvester in Israel.
yeah,
Some
no.
kind of saint from Russia or whatever.
So I want to say that there are two. First of all, does anybody have any other things we can learn from the secular holiday before I throw like two of the major distinctions between the Jewish holiday and the Christian and the secular holiday? So, okay, so nothing else we could learn. All right, we got that out of the way. I'm sure there's more, but I haven't given everybody enough time. What would you say is the major distinction between the Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah and the secular New Year's?
The days of awe, beginning of the days.
Yeah, so I think that the first of all, you're right, it's the days of awe, it's a whole season, but ultimately it's a day of the Jewish holiday is a day of coronation of our king. And what is the main theme of Rosh Hashanah is Malchut, that God is our king, that we're accepting Hashem as our king, and we're accepting a king upon ourselves. And there is, I don't have a lot of knowledge on this topic, but to my mind, that's completely absent, that theme from the secular holiday. Shoshana, you?
No,
Wait, Shoshana was speaking, hold on. What was it?
that's okay. I was also thinking that we see ourselves as judged on Rosh Hashanah. You pass under the shepherds
Right,
and you're being judged. And there is in that an element of concern and worry. Did I do enough? Was I good enough? What do I have to do? What do I have to do to get to Yom Kippur? Secular New Year, you may say to yourself, "Phew, lousy year, I made it through," but no one's judging. We are judged.
no one's judging us, meaning there's,
The secular community, no one was judging them. They survived
well,
2020.
there's no submission, to a higher authority, so there isn't this concept of submission, which is the main theme of Rosh Hashanah, that we're saying it's almost as though we've taken this day, which could have been about other things, and said that this day has to be about our submission, because let's just also remind ourselves that the day Rosh Hashanah is not mentioned in the Torah. There is no mention of this is Rosh Hashanah. There's the holiday of the 7th month, which could be Yom Truah, a day of blasting, but it's never called a Rosh Hashanah. And in fact, the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah 16a says that there are 4 Rosh Hashanahs, there are 4 heads of the year. And I listed in a moment, I can go into it, but it's almost, well, it is a rabbinic invention is too strong of a word, but because everything is the oral law, but it's but it's basically a day of submission, which the rabbis invented, and it's not in the Bible. Yes, Jeff.
I was gonna say, that's not a difference because the Christians, the king is born.
The king is born on Christmas.
Well, I'm not, circumcision, I think they're really celebrating Jesus' entry into the world, and it's the same
Right.
coronation. Yes, we have a difference of views.
Okay, so it's not a difference. Is what you're saying. That could be, yeah, Bruce or April.
If we're gonna put one word on what we do on secular New Year's, the word is probably celebration. I would never associate that word with Rosh Hashanah. And to me, that's a big difference. Rosh Hashanah to me has always been solemn and not celebration.
Well, I would say that that is probably true in most synagogues, but there is in the Talmud the idea that it is a day of coronation. A day of coronation is a day of celebration. And I've always felt that we have to be celebrating the fact that we're accepting God as our king, and that knowing where your direction in life is a very, very important thing to celebrate. That a lot of people are confused in life, and that leads to us down the wrong path. So that's certainly something to celebrate, knowing what we have to do. But you're right. I think clearly most people, as Simon was saying, as Yoni was saying, so good to see you, Yoni. We just observe it as a celebration. But I think if you stop to think, it could become a very depressing day. What am I celebrating? But there's another aspect here which I find incredibly a major theme of Rosh Hashanah. And I've never seen, maybe it's part of the day in the secular year, but I've never, ever heard it. Never heard it. And I think it's a big gap in the secular year, which people should start doing. And that is, let's look at the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah 16a. Okay, I'm going to read it to you. 4 times a year, the world is judged. But Passover season, we're judged for crops. We're judged for crops. Ba'atzeret al perot, in Shavuot, we're judged on the fruits of the tree. Rosh Hashanah, on the holiday of Rosh Hashanah, kol be'ei olam uvrin lefanav kivnei maron. The whole world passes before God like a nemaron. An alternative text says like numeron, which was, you know what a numeron is? That's like a phalanx of the Roman army, meaning to say this is not exactly the image that we get in the liturgy of Rosh Hashanah, which is everybody passes before God one at a time. But the rabbinic literature in the Mishnah is saying that everybody's passing before God together. As it says, Hayotzer Yachad Libam, God creates all their hearts together. Hamavin al kol ma'aseim, he understands all their actions. So this is the idea that the Jewish Rosh Hashanah, at least in rabbinic literature, was a time of communal judgment, a time for the whole community to look at ourselves and say, what have we done as a group? I've never seen that in the secular discussion, that even if you say it's a time for individual resolutions, it's a time for individual direction, and we could grant that. I've never seen this is the time where we as a city have to look back at ourselves and say, where have we fallen short this past year, or stand in trepidation and awe as we take stock of ourselves as a community, as a group. And so that, I think, is a major difference, because the whole Rosh Hashanah liturgy is based upon this communal prayer, the idea of we as a community are standing before God. And that's something that I think is the major difference.
Where do you see Rosh Hashanah starting in historical terms?
Well, it's in the Mishnah. I just read the Mishnah. So the Mishnah is in the year 200 of the Common Era. So the Mishnah is reflecting earlier sources. But this is the idea, this source in the Mishnah, that the whole world passes before God, that, and for judgment, that's not in the Bible on Rosh Hashanah. That's only in the Talmud.
Yeah, but it wasn't in the temple. That's what I was trying to.
The temple has Yom Kippur as a day of atonement, as a day of forgiveness. They have a holiday of Rosh Hashanah, but there is not this discussion of in rabbinic literature, or even anything special in the temple other than the shofar blasts, extra shofar blasts, which were actually done every Rosh Chodesh also. So this idea of judgment, especially communal judgment, is something that's very late in there.
Is it fair to say that until the common era, there was no recognition in the temple of Rosh Hashanah?
No, there was a holiday. There was a holiday which is in the Torah, which is the first day of the 7th month. By the way, it's not even the first month of the first day of the 7th month, which is the day recognizing the creation of the world, which is, by the way, a different theme. What are we celebrating? The creation of the world versus, recognizing God's greatness. But the idea of the judgment as a Yom Hadin, a day of judgment, day of communal judgment, that's in the Mishnah.
Right.
And we don't find that earlier. And we take it for granted today, but it's not in the Torah.
Just technically, the Mishnah has been written, but the oral Torah.
The Mishnah is the oral Torah.
Yeah, but it existed before it was written down. That would.
It was
the tradition.
the
So during the temple times, these concepts and these rules apply. Just wasn't written.
Okay, it's a very complicated point you're raising. There's no question that the Talmud is reflecting earlier traditions, but not the entire Talmud is reflecting earlier traditions. Some of the Talmud are reflecting earlier traditions, and some of the Talmud is reflecting modern or for the contemporary practices. Now, the temples practice on Yom Kippur thematically relates to the way we understand Yom Kippur today, a day of forgiveness, a day of atonement. And that's what the entire tractate of Yoma, which is a discussion of Yom Kippur in the Talmud, reflects. But the temple's practice on Rosh Hashanah does not at all reflect our thematic practice of Rosh Hashanah being a day of judgment. There's nothing in the temple other than the shofar blast, the extra shofar blast, which they anyways would have done on every new moon to reflect this idea of a day of judgment. So it seems that this is a later, and they don't cite real verses about this, connecting Rosh Hashanah with judgment. So it is really it seems to me a later theme, which actually makes sense that if you're going to have atonement, you should have had judgment beforehand. Are you trying to say something, Jeff? Okay, so listen, we're just touching the topic, but God willing, next year, New Year's Eve, I just do want to say one other thing, and hold on, I'm going to stop the recording for this. I just want to say this.